My name is Joanna Sinclair. I'm 37 years old. And the night everything unraveled began with something as ordinary as a folded layoff notice in my bag and ended with me realizing I had been financially and emotionally carrying my entire family for years without ever being seen as a person in return. It started when I came home after being unexpectedly laid off from Ashford and Graves after 12 years of loyal work in analytics, a decision framed as company-wide restructuring that erased my contributions as if they had never mattered, even though I had brought in major clients and never once received a negative review. I should have been devastated, but instead I felt strangely clear. Because what they didn't know is that I already had a growing financial advisory firm with my business partner Greg Whitmore called Sinclair and Whitmore, something I had built quietly at night while still working my corporate job to maintain health insurance and stability. As I drove home to Carterville, I thought I would be met with concern, maybe even comfort, but instead I walked into a living room full of relatives and neighbors where my sister Megan immediately asked who would pay her car loan now, as if my job loss was a public inconvenience rather than a personal crisis. My mother treated the situation like a budget meeting, my father like it was a logistical issue, and my sister like my value existed only in the monthly payments I made on her behalf. Within minutes, I learned they had already known about my layoff through gossip, had discussed it over lemon squares, and had already begun planning how my absence would benefit them. Then came the real blow. My mother calmly announced that since I was barely home and didn't need the room, they had decided my sister would take my bedroom. And my father silently began packing my belongings into cardboard boxes as if I had already been erased from the household. My graduation photo was removed from the wall before I even had time to process what was happening. Standing there, I realized this wasn't new. It was just the first time I was seeing the pattern clearly. For years, I had been sending money home, helping with groceries, paying my father's medical insurance after his diabetes diagnosis, covering my sister's lifestyle choices, and eventually taking over the mortgage entirely. In total, I had sent over $340,000 across 15 years, believing I was supporting my family, while in reality I had become their financial foundation without ever being treated as someone who mattered outside of what I provided. Even my attempts to set boundaries, like refusing to co-sign a $38,000 car loan for my sister, had resulted in emotional punishment and guilt until I eventually gave in. Meanwhile, I had been building Sinclair and Whitmore Financial Advisory with Greg, slowly growing it into a profitable boutique firm serving real clients, all while my family assumed I was simply working late or busy. The irony was that I had planned to eventually surprise them by paying off their entire mortgage as a gift, but that plan died the moment my father packed my belongings into boxes in front of guests without hesitation. After leaving that night with 2 cardboard boxes and no emotional support, I drove to a gas station parking lot and cried not because I had lost my job, but because I realized no one in my family had ever truly seen me beyond my financial contributions. I moved to Austin permanently within days, fully stepping into my business, and for the first time in years, every dollar I earned stayed mine. Still, autopay continued silently transferring thousands each month to my family, mortgage payments, insurance premiums, car loans, habits of responsibility that no longer had reciprocity. For weeks, no one called to ask if I was okay, but they did eventually call when payments stopped, each message focused entirely on money rather than my absence. That was the moment everything crystallized. I was only valuable when I was funding their lives. So I sent a structured email giving a 30-day notice that I would end all financial support, except for a temporary extension on my father's insurance to allow transition time. The reaction was immediate and explosive: calls, accusations, emotional manipulation, but not a single question about my well-being. I didn't respond emotionally. I responded with silence and continued building my company. In the aftermath, my sister's car was repossessed, my parents struggled with mortgage adjustments, and my family's narrative about me shifted into me being selfish or ungrateful, but for the first time, I was no longer inside their control. Slowly, Reality replaced entitlement. My sister got a job at a garden supply store after initial resistance to working. My father began navigating insurance himself, and my mother, who had long depended on my financial stability, was forced to confront the consequences of her choices. My grandmother Ruth, the only consistent voice of wisdom in my life, affirmed what I had done, telling me that generosity without boundaries becomes servitude, and that I had been serving long enough. Meanwhile, Sinclair and Whitmore grew rapidly, expanding staff, clients, and revenue, becoming a real firm rather than a side project hidden in the shadows of my former life. Months later, my family discovered my success when a colleague shared a post about my company, triggering shock, anger, and eventually confrontation at my firm's grand opening. My mother arrived demanding explanations, my sister accused me of betrayal over the consequences of her own car loan, and my father finally admitted in front of everyone that he was wrong for the first time in his life. A quiet acknowledgement that didn't erase the past, but marked a shift. I told them the truth plainly. I had paid for everything for years, and what they called sacrifice was actually my labor, unacknowledged and unappreciated. I didn't scream. I didn't collapse. I simply stated facts while standing in a space I had built for myself. After they left, something inside me settled. Over time, distance replaced chaos. My mother eventually called and admitted she had prioritized convenience over fairness. My sister sent a partial apology mixed with lingering dependency, and my father began occasional conversations that were awkward but sincere. Nothing was fully healed, but something had shifted from extraction to possibility. My life became quieter, not emptier. Peace replaced obligation. I stopped sending money and started saving it. I stopped being the emergency plan for people who never planned for me. I built a home that was mine, a company that reflected my effort, and a life that did not require me to disappear for others to feel stable. The most important realization wasn't that my family had been wrong, but that I had been trained to believe my worth depended on being useful to them. Once I stopped, I discovered I still existed, fully intact. And for the first time, I understood that boundaries are not rejection, they are recognition of self-respect. I am Joanna Sinclair, and I no longer live as someone's safety net. I live as myself.